It's everything that I wish I would have known in those first few pregnancies. And even now, like I find myself thumbing through it when I'm having struggles of my own, and I'm the one who literally wrote the book.
Hey, Mama Bear. Welcome to the Breastfeeding with Confidence podcast. Do you dream of bonding with your baby through exclusive breastfeeding, but worry about breastfeeding pain or low milk supply? Maybe you're struggling with breastfeeding and no one seems to have any answers. I'm Jaimie, doula, international board certified lactation consultant, and mom of 5, and I have been where you are. After working through painful latches, milk supply worries, and postpartum depression, and supporting countless mothers through their breastfeeding journeys for over 8 years, I'm here to tell you breastfeeding doesn't have to be perfect to be positive. Each week, I'll share breastfeeding tips to help you prevent and overcome unexpected breastfeeding challenges so you can actually enjoy bonding with your baby. If you are ready to shut out the toxic whispers of the world, embrace your God-given intuition, and release your inner fierce mama bear, grab some coffee or your favorite herbal tea and let's dive in. Today, my friend Katherine is joining us on the podcast to discuss her book, You Are Not Broken, Are Postpartum, all about the transition from pregnancy into motherhood. If you are pregnant, you definitely need to listen to this so that you can prepare yourself. If you are in the thick of postpartum right now, this episode is intended to help you feel seen, help you know that you are not alone. And I highly recommend grabbing her book. I will link it in the show notes. Before we get started, I am going to ask you real quick to go ahead and rate and review the podcast, share it with a friend. That helps the podcast get seen. It helps other moms find answers and support that they are looking for as they transition from pregnancy into postpartum and try to navigate the early days of breastfeeding. I also want to quickly invite you to go ahead and grab the 5 Mistakes to Avoid When Breastfeeding Guide. It is a free guide that outlines the top 5 mistakes that I see new moms make when breastfeeding. They are preventable, they are avoidable, and they are fixable. So go ahead and grab that free guide at littlebearlactation.com/mistakes. That's MISTAKES. Katherine, I am so excited to have you here. I was on your podcast a little while back and we just had a blast. And so I'm so glad you are here because you have recently released your book, You're Not Broken, You're Postpartum. So I would love it if you could just introduce yourself to everybody and tell everybody a little bit about who you are as a mother, as an educator, and what your mission and message is for the moms who are postpartum.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. So, a little bit about me in a very brief way. I'm a mom of 6. I started having kiddos in 2016. So, my oldest is 9 now, and my youngest I just had in May. So, he's about 4 months now. So, 6 kids. And I've been a birth worker since 2019. So, a couple years into motherhood, I was a photographer and someone asked me if I could photograph their birth. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I really wasn't thinking a whole lot of it. I had no idea. I mean, I had 2 of my own kids, but at that point, the first induction turned to a C-section. The second baby was a scheduled C-section. And so I hadn't really experienced like what it would be like to go to just a first time mom birth. Even my sister-in-law had a baby at this point. And when it came time for her to have the baby, I was like, I'll see you later. I'll be in the hallway. Can't wait to see him. Like I'd never actually experienced birth before. And so this client of mine, I went to her birth and I was there for 18 hours because I had no idea how long an induction could truly go. But that is really what ended up lighting a fire in me for birth work, because I went to this birth and I got to see everything unfold. And it was so beautiful and magical. And I remember just thinking the whole time, like, oh my goodness, what in the world? This is great. And so I started offering birth photography as a service. And then not long after that, about 5 or 6 months after, I found out I was pregnant with my third. And that one was kind of a wild card for me. We knew we wanted a third, but I had just finished recovering from my second cesarean. And I was like, man, I don't think I'm ready for a third one. I had an OBGYN at the time that basically was saying, you're going to be a C-section mom. And so I'd come to terms with that in my mind, but I knew I wasn't ready for the third one. And so that was a really weird pregnancy because I kind of started it out like down in the dumps. I was excited that I was going to have a baby because we wanted a third, but I was not excited about the outcome, right? Having the other surgery. And so long story short, it led me down this rabbit hole of looking into research regarding vaginal birth after cesareans, what is possible, what you need to like have someone to support you and all the things. And the more that I learned, the more my eyes were open. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's a whole nother world out there that I didn't even know existed. And so that really kind of got me on this path towards becoming a childbirth educator. Later on, it led me towards becoming a doula and eventually having my own podcast and just doing everything that I can to empower other moms to be able to learn everything about childbirth and like what our bodies are capable of. But through this journey into birth work, I also started to recognize patterns among myself and postpartum. I had postpartum depression with several of my kiddos afterwards. And in the first two, it really wasn't recognizable. I knew I was struggling. I had no idea that it was postpartum depression. I didn't know that that was a thing really. And I just knew that after birth, it was really hard. And I would cry for no reason. And I would have all these heavy emotions. And I would feel so alone, even though I did have people in my corner. So I tried to be like vigilant in my third pregnancy. And I'm like, I don't want to have postpartum depression again. I'm going to start seeing a therapist during this pregnancy. And so I did. And I prepared myself a little bit better during that pregnancy. And my hope was that knowing what was going to come, I would be able to kind of like get in front of it and it not be so bad. And for the most part, that really was true. I did a ton of mindset work during my pregnancy and I was able to kind of know what to expect. And so it wasn't so much like I was blindsided by postpartum. And then 6 weeks postpartum with that baby, we live in Louisiana and we had this giant hurricane that came and it completely messed up our house. And it was like, joke's on me, right? I thought I had everything good. And then all of a sudden we're in this big like world of uncertainty. And I really started feeling that with that incoming stress, I just started to snowball. And so I decided after that postpartum season, early that next year, that I really wanted to start writing a book. And it was kind of one of those like dream board ideas of like, okay, I've been through a lot of different circumstances. At this point, I had 3 kids. And I was like, I really want to write down the things that I have learned because I did feel like the prep that I did during pregnancy did help. And so like outside circumstances kind of took over. But I really wanted to start compiling all of my thoughts. And so this project was kind of birthed in 2021. And I started on this book. And then as life goes, things kind of pull you away and things get put on the back burner for a while. And it was actually put on the back burner for 4 years.
Conceived in 2021 and born in 2025.
Exactly. And so, the idea was born. I started writing the chapters in 2021. I was actually working with a publisher and a book coach. Like I was really intent on this is going to happen. And then I was thrown a job opportunity, which meant birth work got put on the back burner and we started having more kids. All these things kind of pull you away. After my 5th baby, I really got drawn back to birth work. And that's when I started my doula certification. I started the path to start getting a podcast started and all these things and found out that I was pregnant with baby number 6. And I was like, okay, eventually I want to write this book, right? So whenever I was waiting for baby number 6 to arrive.
We can't keep making excuses, right?
I know. It's eventually.
I'm like, if I'm going to keep getting pregnant, I can't keep using that as an excuse.
I know. And it's such an easy thing to do. You find out you're pregnant and you're like, okay, things are about to change. Let me just hold off on anything huge and wait. And maybe it'll just disappear, but it doesn't. No. And so like the weeks before I was having this 6th baby, I was trying to get everything in line for my podcast. And so I was doing all this work and in preparation to be able to have basically 2 months off where I didn't have to worry about anything related to my business. And I was successful in doing that, which was wonderful. But then this baby was born and, I had a couple of weeks to soak him in. And then me being the type of person that I am, I was like, what do I do? I have all this time and I have nothing to do. And out of nowhere, I messaged my publisher and I was like, hey, so I'm kind of thinking about revisiting that book we started a while back. If I did, like, what does your business look like right now as far as publishing? What is the timeline? And she basically was like, oh, I have time to publish it in July. How close are you? And I was like, oh, I mean, like, I need to pick it up and like finish it, but maybe I could. And so I hyper focused. I'm very ADHD, but hyper focus is my superpower. And I kind of just powered through and took that raw moment of postpartum and like feeling all of the things like after having just had my baby like 4 weeks before. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick the book back up. I'm going to write it and we're going to be done. And I picked up what I had and I hated it all. I was like, oh my gosh, I wrote that? Like what in the world? And so I kind of just started from scratch and I just started writing down all of my thoughts. And one chapter would be written and I'm like, oh, but I need to write about this and I need to write about this. And eventually I got to 25 chapters and I sent it off to the publisher and we published in early August. And it was just one of those things that it must have been a God thing, because otherwise I don't know that I could have written all of those words on my own, in such a short amount of time. But I do think that it's something that I'm really excited about, that it's out there for moms, because it's everything that I wish I would have known in those first few pregnancies. And even now, like, I find myself thumbing through it when I'm having struggles of my own, and I'm the one who literally wrote the book. I have so many different chapters, and I was trying to encompass like everything we go through. I feel like postpartum, whether it's your first or your sixth, like it's so many different cycles that we go through. And we think like, okay, I've got it all figured out. Everything's well oiled. It's moving really well. I've got this. We have like that feeling of being Superwoman. We finally got it figured out. And usually it's within like a week of that for me that everything comes crumbling down and I'm like, what is going on here? And so it's really cool to be able to like have that resource for myself to look back on, even though I'm the one who technically wrote the words. I can still read my own words and be like, oh yeah, I need that perspective. It kind of helps you pull back to see it all. And so I didn't expect that from the book. I was expecting to put things out for other people. And I've kind of gotten a little return on it myself, which is funny in a sense.
Yeah, I love that so much. So, like, part of your story, so much of your story resonates with me because it just sounds so similar to my story. Like, I've got 5 kids, 10 and under, so very similar timeline. Did the whole doula birth photography thing for a while. And after my 4th was born, I actually wrote a book on parenting and what you need to know during the first year with a baby. And it was like, I wrote that from between the time that he was born and September. He was born in May. And I think we started, like, the final draft was in September and it was published in February. So it was also very much like, it's amazing how in that postpartum chaos, we can still find that side of ourselves to create. We're being so pulled in so many different directions, but we can still create something so impactful and beautiful. And I remember, like, I had no idea you were publishing a book, and then I saw one of your reels about it, and you were just reading it. It was like a whole bunch of B-roll, and you were just reading the words, and it just sounded so beautiful and profound. And I was just thinking, like, if I was a new mom scrolling Instagram and just like landed on this, like, it would have like brought me to tears in that moment and just been that reality check. It was so powerful. So what is maybe one of your favorite stories from, like, what is your favorite chapter in the book or your favorite lesson in the book?
That is so hard. Okay. So I don't know if I can pick a favorite chapter. I don't know if I can do that.
That's
But
okay.
one of my favorite things that I wrote about in it is about the village. I feel like so many times we hear the concept of like it takes a village to raise a child, right? And so we go into motherhood and we kind of expect it to just be there. And I think a lot of the times I saw something on Instagram the other day actually, and it kind of stuck with me. It was talking about how we all want to have that village, but then when it comes down to being the village for someone else, like, what are we doing? And we have to realize that, like, yes, we have a village, but we also are called to be the village for other people. And so something that I break down in the book is talking about how a lot of the times we expect people around us, whether family members or close friends or whatever, we expect them to kind of just be there for us. And I think it's a unspoken expectation. A lot of the times we have a hard time saying like, hey, I need help, or hey, can you come sit with me, or hey, can you watch these kids so I can have baby time, or whatever we need, right? And a lot of the times those people who are closest to us are trying their best to respect what they feel like our space needs to be. And, they know we just had a baby. They know that we're healing. And so they kind of keep away from us a little bit, not to isolate us, but to give us that space to just soak it all in. And so when you combine those two things of having the people who are really close to you that are trying to respect your space and give you that time, and then you feeling like you can't actually ask somebody for help, it kind of ends up being a recipe for isolation without even being intended to be. And I think that's one of the hardest things of motherhood is feeling like you're isolated, feeling like you're the only one who's feeling a certain way, or feeling like you're drowning, but you can't ask for help because you don't want to be an inconvenience. Whereas most of the time, if you do reach out to those people, they'll be there in a heartbeat. but it's just something about becoming a mother. We feel like all of a sudden everything's our responsibility and we can't ask others for help. Or if we
It's
do, that
so
somehow we're failing.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting that you say that because I'm thinking about like the mixed messages that moms are given during pregnancy. And it's like, you're going to need all this support, village, like you said, right? And then it's also tell everybody to stay away, like tell everybody
Yes.
to respect your boundaries, like pull away. And it's like, if we think about what a village looked like, and maybe it's a little bit romanticized, but if we think about what a village looked like 200 years ago, 300, 400, 500 years ago, it was women in a close knit community. They all knew each other, like they were related or friends, right? And they
Yeah.
had the baby, and they didn't have to call and ask for help. They were there. There
Yeah.
was already a system of some people were the people cooking, some people were the people watching the children. Like everybody had their job, and they just
Yeah.
shifted things when a baby was born, right? And they took care of the new mother. She didn't have to ask for help. So I think it's probably normal for us to not feel like we should have to ask for help. But then we're also living in a society that does isolate us, right?
Yeah.
I always say, I've said this on a couple episodes now, we are in the most connected generation of humanity, and we are the most isolated and least connected all at the same time. And
Yeah.
it's, it's something that I think, just my husband is in the Air Force. We're a military family. We move around a lot. So we have never had a village because we have never been somewhere long enough to build up enough friends, right? And then our family lives so far away. So we've been very blessed. Our family has flown out to us every time we've had a baby to be as much support as possible. But it is that thing where you're afraid to ask for help, terrified to ask for help. Why? Why are we terrified to ask for help? And it's something that I kind of experience today. Like, and I'm still postpartum. My baby is like over 2 years old now, but
Yeah.
I kind of had that snapping moment where I finally just like let go and was like, these are the things I need help with, and nobody's helping with that. And that's when everybody was like, why didn't you just say so? Like,
Exactly.
well,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's something that if you are listening, if you're a new mom listening, don't be afraid to ask for the help. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
So what is your like tips for people, or maybe like your message for the mom who is afraid to ask for help and who thinks, well, I don't have a village? Because it's very easy for us to feel like we don't have a village, even if we do. And then there are some of us who just don't have that village in place. So
Yeah.
what are your tips for those moms to, the title of your book is You're Not Broken, You're Postpartum. So what
Yeah.
is your tips for those moms to feel a little less broken if they truly don't have the support around them that they need?
So I would say I would categorize this in two different ways. So if I'm talking to a pregnant mom who hasn't had her baby yet, I would absolutely say, like, try to plan your best for postpartum. I feel like a lot of the times we focus on pregnancy and what's going to happen and birth plans, and we really don't get to that whole planning postpartum. I know we talked about this in
Yeah.
our podcast that you were on, but I do like postpartum planning sessions. But even beyond that, like just for the pregnant mom to be able to sit down and say, okay, I might be anticipating this. What can I put in place? Can I put in place meal plans? How can I make my life easier? We talk about like maybe some meal planning, maybe like a meal train if you do have a village that's wanting to jump in, getting on the same page with your partner. I do have an exercise that I would love to share with your audience. I
Yes.
can post the link for it for you. But it's basically, I call it a power up, and it's like a postpartum reset. So what I do with my clients that I use this with is it's an exercise that the couple can go through together, and they look at like everything from day-to-day life. And so like, what are things that normally fall on your plate? Is it dishes? Is it laundry? Is it like school pickup, or do you homeschool, or like what is on your agenda? And they both kind of just what I call brain dump it all onto a piece of paper
Mm-hmm.
and make a list individually. And then I have them write down like, what is the one thing that if you never had to do again for like your entire postpartum season, what would you not want to do? Is it the dishes? I hate dishes. Is it laundry? What is that one thing? And then talking to each other, comparing the list and saying, okay, maybe I thought of some things that my husband didn't think of, making that combined list together of like, what does this house need to run? And then also being able to look at those things that like maybe the other person doesn't love to do, like one or two items, and say, okay, for this X amount of period, so let's say we're talking postpartum, for the next 2 months, like you can take care of all the dishes for me and I'll make sure I keep laundry running. That was something that me and my husband did because he hates laundry and I hate dishes. And so for a good while, I mean, probably over a year, we just knew like when the dishes got piled up, that was his thing he was going to take care of. And I just kept the laundry going.
And if you really hate dishes, you just keep having babies, so you never have to do the
Right?
dishes.
Yeah. But I feel like what it
I
does
joked that
too.
with my husband because when I was pregnant with my first, the morning sickness, I couldn't do the dishes because of morning sickness, and it
Mhm.
like turned into a thing that I'm like, I don't think I've touched the dishes for 10 years because I just kept getting pregnant and having
Yeah,
babies and couldn't do the dishes.
exactly. It's just like a
That's so
secret plan,
funny.
right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
of
I
course.
mean,
That's what it's all about.
just I think it's a great exercise to like help partners be able to communicate with each other and to be able to say, okay, here's what my needs are, or here's what I'm anticipating. You can do it before you have your baby, or you can do it in the thick of postpartum if you just need a full blown reset. But it really like helps all of those things that are going unsaid that like we're resenting each other for. It helps take all of that and put it on paper in a way that we can like strategically look at it and say, okay, here's what my schedule looks like day to day with my work or with mothering or whatever it is. And here's the thing that I realistically can get done. Can you take care of any of these? And sometimes it works great. Sometimes it's something you have to do it over and over. But for those who do have the village that's present, that they just don't really know how to ask them for help, I find that to be a really cool reset. My life coach recently was talking with me because we're in a season that's really hard right now. And she was like, Katherine, what can you delegate? Like, what does Katherine not have to do? Can you have your mom come for a day each week, like just for a couple of hours and help with nap time? Like, what can you ask of others to help you with? And that's hard for me. But if I'm speaking to the people who don't have that village, like you said, you guys move around and you don't have the family that's present, like physically with you. And by the time you make friends, you have to get up and you have to move again. That's really
Yeah.
hard. And so I think that's where the other piece that you said kind of can come into play, where we talk about how like we live in a world that is so digitally connected, yet we're so isolated. And I think that social media is huge with that. Like we see people all the time through social media. We watch other people's lives and then we sit back and we compare ourselves to it. And that's really hard. And so a way that we can use that connection for our benefit would be whether it's through like finding a life coach or finding some type of online therapy that we can go to, or staying connected digitally to our friends, whether it's like accountability partners or whatever. I think something that's really important for us to realize as moms is that even though a lot of the times we want that village there with us in person, if we're not able to have that, like having connection, even if it's digital, is still so important. Like FaceTiming, phone calls, like having a text message thread with your best friend or whatever it is that you call and you like legitimately say, how are you today? Like, I want the good, the bad, the ugly. I texted that to my best friend
Yeah.
this morning. I was like, hey, good morning. I want the good, the bad, the ugly. What are you feeling today? What do you need to vent about? Get it all out now. Because what that does is not only does it help me feel connected to her, but it gives her that invitation to where she doesn't feel like she's burdening me with any information that maybe I didn't ask for, or she doesn't feel like she's just being negative Nancy all the time. It gives her that invitation to say like, hey, I see you and I want to support you. Just let me know what's going on. And if all you need to do is yell through the phone, do it. It's fine. That's what I'm here for, because sometimes just
Yeah.
getting it out helps. But I think that for those who don't have a village, also realizing like how incredibly strong that we are. I feel like a lot of the times we feel like we are broken and we feel like we can't do things because we have that fear of like not being able to move forward because we're lacking something. And whenever we sit back and we really look at it, like we have that power inside of us and God gave us these babies to raise for a reason. And I feel like in the seasons of hard for me, I always come out on the outside or on the other side having learned some type of lesson, whether it's about motherhood or about myself or about my kids or whatever. Are they fun seasons to go through? Absolutely not. they,
I know. Do
they
you ever
suck
find
really
yourself just like
bad.
screaming, like, what lesson are
Mhm.
you trying to teach me? Can you tell me the lesson
Exactly.
now? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that it's very important to acknowledge that, like, yes, we preach this message about having a village, but some people don't have a village. Or some people, I write this in the book too, some people have toxic villages. You may have family that's close and that's near, but that aren't building you up and they're not really helping you succeed in motherhood. And they may be like somehow breaking you down. And I think that's important to realize too, that boundaries are also important in this. And so making sure that the village that you do curate for yourself, because you do get to pick who your village is one that is going to be supportive of you through every facet of your life, and that's not going to be gaslighting you.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think something else too is not everybody has the means to hire help, like the
Yeah.
practical help. But back to, if you are struggling and your family's not close, but maybe they would be supportive if they were close, maybe they can pitch in to help you get a cleaner for one day just to help out. Like, don't be
Yeah.
afraid to ask for things like that, because I think sometimes people don't, like, people like myself, I grew up, like, having somebody clean our house wasn't a thing. It was, we
Yeah.
cleaned our own house. And so to ask for that felt very inappropriate. And then it
Yeah.
got to the point where it was like, somebody was like, why don't we just hire somebody to clean the house
Mm-hmm.
once to come do that? And it was like, oh, you can do that. And so just
Yeah.
realizing that, like, don't assign meaning to needing help. Like, don't make it mean that, like, okay, well, I had to, even if you have to hire somebody to help, if it's within your means, like, it doesn't make you, like, incapable of taking care of yourself. It doesn't make you snotty or think like there doesn't have to be like all this meaning attached to it. And I think as new
Right.
moms, we find a way to like attach so much meaning to everything that we almost back ourselves into a corner of impossibility. It's like,
Yeah. We
I
just
know
stack up
I do
all this
that.
guilt
Yeah.
for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I do that. My husband's always like, okay, I'm giving you a solution and you're finding all the problems with it. And I think as mothers, we kind of have a tendency to do that to protect our children, right? Like, it's like it born into us to look for the problem so that we can protect our children. But sometimes that can hurt ourselves during that postpartum period when we are afraid to accept help, even if it's being offered and handed to us. Um,
Yeah.
so you're not broken, you're postpartum. I love the title of that. I just, it's it's so true. I think so many of us feel so broken, and it's like, you said like you were going through postpartum depression and you didn't even realize, that it was a thing. And I think it's important to note as well that big emotions are part of postpartum, and it doesn't mean it's necessarily a diagnosis or a problem. It's just part of the process. You're being broken down, and not broken, but like broken down and
Yeah.
rebuilt, right? It's like you break down a muscle and build it up stronger. Like, you're becoming something new and different. And it's a hard process. It doesn't mean it's a bad process. So what inspired the title?
My life, simply. So during that second postpartum period that I had, I remember literally just thinking over and over that I was broken. Like, those were the words in my mind. Like, I literally felt that I was broken because I grew up in a home. I had two siblings with me. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and like everything from my recollection, when I talked to her, she's like, "What are you talking about? It was a train wreck, you know?" But from my recollection as like a kid growing up, like everything just seemed so in order and so perfect. And our house was always tidy. And she made it to like all of our sports. And like she was so intentional with us every single day. And I know that she had times where she lost it, but there was just so many positive moments that you don't remember all those negative moments. And so being in the thick of postpartum with my second baby, I just remember only seeing the hard. I was only seeing the hard difficulties that I was going through, the big emotions, the meltdowns, the just freaking out about everything. And I was like, what in the world is wrong with me? It didn't feel like that was normal. I had never been told to expect that. I had never been told that like hormone shifts were going to be so crazy and that there's also neurological shifts. I'd never been told about any of that. And so to be experiencing that firsthand and just like fully in tears, I remember just telling my husband, like, I don't know why I'm broken. I don't know what's wrong with me and I don't know how to fix it. And I know that I'm raging and all these emotions are everywhere and I lose my mind and I yell. And then after the fact, I'm like, where did that even come from? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so that's really like how the title was born, is that I completely felt broken for so long. And then the more that I learned about myself and about everything else, I realized like it's not brokenness. It's literally postpartum. Like you just said, it's a complete identity shift. The first chapter of my book talks about like the identity crisis of motherhood. And it's that we feel like we stare in the mirror and we're like, who is this person? I don't recognize them. And we assume that because we don't recognize ourselves, that something is wrong with us because we feel like we should be the same person on the other side, but we're not. Going through pregnancy and birthing our baby and experiencing postpartum, it's like a transformative shift for us. And we're supposed to become into this new person because now we're a mother and we have children that we're looking after. And I think that that's not the expectation of a lot of moms going into it. We just assume that like if we were this really put together person before having kids and we were great at keeping a schedule and our house was always clean, that just like we would have the baby and physically recover and then bounce right back to that. And that's usually not the case. Maybe for some people, but for a lot of people, that's a really big struggle afterwards. And I feel like just recently, like with social media and all those sorts of things, there's a lot more moms that are coming out. I call them like mom influencers that are starting to shed a light to like how hard things actually can be in motherhood. But for the longest time, everything we saw was everybody's put together life. You know, it was very
Yeah, well,
curated
you
for
have to
social media.
bounce back and be back to work
Yeah,
in 6 weeks, and there's a lot of cultural things there too that I think kind of come into play. Like, okay, yeah, you had this baby, and even if you got maternity leave, cool, you got 12 weeks of maternity leave. You're lucky. Now, 3 months later, you're back to work and you're fine now, right? You're healed. You're totally back to normal. You're back to business. And it's like, no, I'm still dealing with breastfeeding issues. And now I have to be separated from my baby. And I don't like that feeling, but everybody's telling me it should be fine and it feels wrong inside. And so I think I'm broken. And I think there is a lot, oh gosh, we could probably go down a whole thing on that, but almost like toxic feminism
yeah,
comes to light when we start talking about postpartum recovery and that expectation of doing it all. Mothers should be able to do it all. And in so many ways, yes, we can do it all, but should we have to?
right.
And I think
Exactly.
that's what I think a lot of us really kind of need to accept. And it is so hard to accept, especially if you are somebody with a career and very high achieving, or like where you have had a very masculine approach to your life, and then you're thrown into motherhood, and now it's like you have no choice but to be extremely feminine, but you don't know, like that feels foreign. It feels
Hmm.
extremely foreign, and I think that is where so many of us struggle. And I'm not trying to say that women of the past and mothers of the past didn't struggle, but if we combine that with that lack of a village or that lack of willingness to ask for our village, I mean, what do we expect to happen? I told my husband one time, I remember having a complete meltdown and then being like so frustrated and saying like, I feel like I'm broken, like same as everything you were saying. I feel like I'm broken. I don't know why I can't fix myself. But also, I feel like this is a completely rational response to a completely screwed up situation. Like
Yeah,
I don't think I need to be medicated or any of these things. It's like I don't feel like I should be in a position that I'm in, and like
right.
this is a survival mechanism, not brokenness. Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, I really love everything you're saying here. I think your book is going to bring so much comfort to moms, just to know that they're not alone. If you can at least know that you're not alone, that is like the first step in maybe feeling a little less broken. If everybody's broken, then maybe none of us are broken.
Right? I think that's a great outlook to have. And that's what I
Yeah.
really hope for this book. I really wanted to write something where, like you were saying earlier, like even if someone doesn't have the means to go out and like hire a coach or have therapy or whatever it may be, because unfortunately, those things cost way more than most people can afford. But that's what a lot of people need is to have like somebody in
Yeah.
their back pocket. And so I was like, if I can create this book, and like I said, I tried to cover as many bases as I could, hopefully it would be a good resource to be a starting point for a mom who has these things that are taking place in her life, and she can, if at a minimum, just realize like, oh, this is normal, like a lot of people are going through this, or even more so, like maybe she can read some of the chapters and be like, oh, this is why I feel like I feel, I tried to really cover like the biology of what happens postpartum in our bodies, like through pregnancy and birth, but also recovery, like any type of neurological factors that can be impacted, birth trauma, that's a huge one. How like postpartum depression can start with how we're treated in our pregnancy, how our birth goes, a lot of the times when our birth doesn't go the way that we want for it to go, that kind of starts that snowball downhill without us realizing it, because all of a sudden we feel like, oh, maybe I couldn't have done this. I shared with you that my first birth was a cesarean. We had an induction, and very quickly into the induction, they were like, oh, your baby is going to need to be born via cesarean. If you continue to labor, she might go into distress. And there was a ton of fear tactics in there that I did not recognize at the time. But having a birth that I thought was going to go one way, that quickly went a completely different way, having an extremely hard recovery physically, having issues nursing afterwards that lasted for weeks upon weeks with sleep deprivation, like all of those things create this environment where all of a sudden we've dug this big hole and we don't know how to get out of it. And sometimes we don't even recognize that, like how we got into it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really important to be able to understand all the components that go into it. I don't think that there's just one thing that causes someone to have postpartum depression. There are so many different things that can influence this. And I think sometimes, like, yes, we can get to a point where maybe medication is great for us to be able to get that perspective shift and to kind of pull ourselves out and say, okay, where do I go from here? But I think it's also important to recognize that sometimes we may not have actual postpartum depression or anxiety. We may just be really struggling without a good support system with little to no sleep. And that's valid too.
Yeah. No, I talk about that a lot because it's so many layers. And so
Mm-hmm.
often doctors will just be like, oh, well, here's a medication. And then they send you to a therapist that's like, well, quit breastfeeding and everything will be better. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's not the problem. There's so much gaslighting.
Yeah.
I know, like, kind of like you said, it starts with the birth trauma. And you might have a perfect birth and this can still happen. So I don't want to, like, mislead anybody to say that, like, if you have a perfect birth, then you won't have this.
Right.
But I had such a similar story to what you're saying, and I know so many moms have that are listening. And maybe if they haven't had their baby yet, they don't know it yet, but they will have a similar story. And
Yeah.
it starts with that birth trauma, and then you're told, well, you have a healthy baby. Your baby's alive. What are you upset
Mm.
about?
Yeah.
And so that's when you start feeling that brokenness, like, oh, maybe I should just be grateful, but I'm not. And then you have the feeding issues. And I remember so distinctly, my baby was struggling to feed after a difficult birth, a cesarean, it was unwanted, separation, the worst,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember flipping through the Womanly Art of Breastfeeding book, and there's a chapter in there, like a little section where the lady was like, I brought my baby home and didn't even like him and didn't know why. And I kept reading that section over and over and telling myself, like, okay, so I'm not the only person who feels this way.
Yeah.
I'm not the only person who feels this way. Like, why do I hate my baby? And it wasn't that I hated him. It was that we
The
weren't being
disconnect.
given that opportunity to bond, right? There was a
Yeah.
physiological disconnect. And then with all the struggles I was feeling, I'm having people tell me, "Oh, well, you should be thrilled. You should be thrilled. Aren't you happy? At
Mm-hmm.
least this, at least that." And
Yeah.
I'm sitting here looking at this book and I'm like, that I just remember that line. Like I remember sitting at my kitchen table, reading it over and over and showing it to my husband and being like, this is what I'm feeling. I don't
Yeah.
know how to fix it, but I'm not alone, but it can't stay this way. And maybe I'm not broken, but I think I might be. And it
Yeah.
was just this spiral. And I'm like, I always tell people, like, I'm just really stubborn of like, that is the only thing that got me through is I'm stubborn as and like,
Yeah.
I tell people like I I probably like I would have I don't know. I I feel like during postpartum is like I fight like crazy to just
Mm-hmm.
like get through it. And sometimes it feels like that, but you're not broken. Like
Yeah.
it
No, and
and
that's all
it
so
doesn't
valid.
mean yeah, it doesn't mean medication is the answer. And it, like you said, it can be used as a tool. But if it's just being tossed at you with like this willy nilly, like here you go, this hands off kind of like here's the solution, that's not the solution. It's
Yeah.
medication will never be the solution. It might be a tool, but it won't be the solution. And it's like I think something people don't look at or think about often enough is nutrition.
Yeah.
What nutrition postpartum looks like and what it should look like and how post or nutrition during pregnancy and preconception all influences what postpartum might feel like. And then the sleep deprivation, like you said, like there are so many layers. I just worked in a family last week. I'm going to wrap it up here soon. Sorry. But I just worked with a family last week that I walked in and the dad's eyes are completely bloodshot. Mom sitting there with this smile plastered on her face. And I'm like, they've got a bunch of kids. This is like the fourth or fifth kid. And I'm like, I know exactly what's going on here. I said, how are you? Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
great. And I said, stop being polite. And it was instant tears, like
Yeah.
instant tears. And her husband like took this sigh of relief that was almost like somebody else sees this and
Yeah.
expects this and isn't afraid of this, isn't shaken by this. And it just, it just, again, it comes back to, this is like, she had breastfed her babies before she knew what she was doing.
Right.
And it was just being there to be like, you're doing a good job. Like, yes, you
Yeah.
have these concerns. These concerns are normal. These
Mm-hmm.
these challenges are normal. And just having somebody to walk you through that and tell you exactly what to do, like, can make such a difference. And when we left, I had given her some advice and I had left and I was talking to her husband outside. Because sometimes, like the dad will walk me out or whatever. Like I always come with all these bags, so they'll help me carry them back out because they're like, I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I
Yeah.
got it. But they're like, no, I'm carrying them back out. And so I'm always like giving them little tips, like if this happens, like don't be surprised if this happens. And he looked at me and he was like, all she needed was another woman to tell her that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can tell her all day long and she thinks I'm crazy, but another woman tells her that this is normal and she believes it. And it just comes back to that village that you were talking about, I think, is like, our husbands are great to be there for us, but sometimes they just aren't what we need. And I
Yeah.
think that's okay too.
Yeah, no, I definitely touched on that in the book too. I wrote a little bit about multi-generational families and how like we have shifted as a society to have more what we call nuclear families. Like, you got a husband and a wife that move into their own home, but used to it was multi-generational. You had your mom, your sisters, your aunts, your grandmothers, you had everybody there who already knew you. And like we touched on earlier, when you have a baby, they kind of just step in and they take care of everything for you. And they also see you in a different way than your partner could see you. And I think that that's really important because a lot of the times, all we need is to be seen and we need something to be validated. Like, even if we feel like everything is falling apart, I don't think that we even expect someone to give us like 5 solutions that's going to fix everything. Sometimes we just need people to see what we're going through and to say, like, this is fine. It's totally normal. And I love how you noted in that story with your client how like as soon as you saw her, you brought her to tears. And that still happens with me to this day. Literally today. So I go to therapy every couple of weeks. And usually I can go to therapy. We kind of go over the weeks that we've had, what was hard, what wasn't hard, what's the game plan, all these things. It's like a strategy session, right? And today I went in there and my newborn has not been sleeping and all of these different things. And I mentioned with her, I was going to have the podcast with you today. And she goes, oh, that's great. And I was like, yeah, it is. And she's like, why does your face not say that's great? And I was like, because we're going to talk about my book. And she's like, okay, that's wonderful. Why would that not be great? And I was like, because I'm really having a hard time. And the fact that I just wrote a book on postpartum makes me feel like I shouldn't be talking about the book on postpartum. And she was like, she saw me in that moment and she was like, but you wrote the book for times like this for other people, right? And I was like, yeah. She said, okay, so why can't it be for you too? And I literally just started crying and I was like, I don't know. And it reminded me of like when I was writing this book, and I know I said it several times as writing it, like in the text, I don't have it all figured out. Like, yes, I have had 6 babies. I'm in my 6th postpartum. Like, I wanted to write down all the things that I've learned along the way, good tips, perspective shifts, like all these things that I've been able to use as tools. But it doesn't mean that I have everything figured out, that this postpartum has been absolutely like flawless. Here I am, just published a book a month or 2 ago. And I find myself in this season to where like I wake up and I'm just like, it's like survival mode. Am I going to get through today without crying? I'm really not
Mhm.
sure. Things like worked great last week and now they don't. And so it's those kinds of things that I wrote about in this book for other people. And it wasn't until today that I realized, like, hey, maybe I wrote those words for myself too. And so just being able to be seen is so important. And I think that that's even something when we go back to like the people without a village, what can they do? Like, find someone who genuinely loves you that can see you, whether they're in person or whether they're not. And the hardest skill I think that we can learn as a mom is to be able to be real, like have somebody in your life that you can be real with, that you know, when they say, "Hey, how are you?" It's okay for you to say, "You know what? Yesterday was horrible, and I think today might be worse." And they can say,
Yeah.
"Oh, really? Why? What's happening?" And sometimes, like, just the power of speaking it out, we figure it out on our own. And sometimes the power of speaking it out just lets us get all of those emotions out to where they're not a barrier anymore. And all of a sudden we can be like, "Oh, you know what? I think I know what to do moving forward." Or, "I feel better because you sat with me in it for a minute, and it's going to be okay." Like, I don't know what the next step is. I have no idea where I'm going to go moving forward, but I know it's going to be okay. I think that's
I
so
love
important.
that. I love that so much. And it's being able to be real is so hard in our world. Because
Yes.
so many people get so scared when you are real. Like they're literally scared off, or social media makes it really hard to be real. And my mother-in-law was like, "I watch your videos," and I was like,
Do
"Oh."
you?
I was like, "I wish you wouldn't." She goes, "No, I love them. I love them." And
Mhm.
I know, like, I am intentionally very real in them. And she was like, I wish I had that when I was in this season. I wish I had somebody
Yeah.
showing me that this is okay." So, and that made me think, like, that this is not new. As much as we can say that, social media is challenging and this and that is a challenge, like, this also isn't new.
Yeah.
Women have been doing this for generations and feeling these things for generations. Now we're just separated from that support to tell us that it's normal.
Yeah.
So being seen, to bring that back to being able to be seen. Like, if you are listening right now, mama, we see you. We see
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely.
And if you read You're Not Broken, You're Postpartum, I'm pretty sure you're gonna feel very seen, because I've heard the excerpts and they are just beautiful, beautifully written. So where can people find the book? Where can they find you? And where can they listen to all of your wisdom?
Okay, so if you want to buy the book, you have two different options. So the first one, it's on Amazon. You can get it Amazon Prime, or there's an ebook on there as well, depending on how you prefer to read your books. Or you can order one directly through me, through my website. It's www.made4birth.com. On the homepage, there's a little button that says "Get my copy now." You can click that, and I can send an autograph copy to you. But if you don't want an autograph copy and you want it in like 2 days, you're welcome to do Amazon Prime. And then as far as where to find me, I'm on social media. So I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. The hashtag, or the handle, is Made for Birth as well. And I also have a podcast. It's called the Made for Birth Podcast. We talk about everything childbirth related. We talk about some postpartum things as well. It's very much like VBAC geared. So for moms that have had a cesarean, but we talk about so many things that can be relevant even if you haven't had a cesarean before, or if it's your first birth and you're wanting to avoid one, it's great as well. And so I hope that my presence is a little bit more active in that coming up in the next month or so. But those are all the places that anyone listening can find me.
Thank you for
Yeah,
coming today. It was a really great chat.
it really was. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Of course.
All right, Mama Bear, that is a wrap for today. If this episode helped you feel a little more confident or a little more prepared for breastfeeding, can I ask you a quick favor? Go ahead and leave me a review. It helps other moms find this podcast and join us in this amazing community of fierce and confident Mama Bears. And hey, if you know a friend who could use some encouragement or real talk about pregnancy, breastfeeding, and all things motherhood, share this episode with her. You've got this, Mama Bear. Trust your instincts, stay fierce, and I'll catch you in the next episode.